Watch part 1 first before watching this video. Even with Earth 1 and Earth 2 now gone and the Monitor slain, the shadowy figure with Psycho Pirate and Red Tornado as his hostage has not been empowered as expected, and says that he needs the Flash for the remaining 3 Earths.
The Flash is the only being capable of traversing a dimensions unaided. I could not allow him to be free. Red Tornado has powers which will allow me to control my new universe. He will be reshaped as my tool. Still, there are 3 universes remaining. Without the Monitor, their destruction is ensured. Now, Psycho Pirate, there is work to be done.
On board the Monitor's satellite, now infection-free Layla stumbles upon Pariah cradling the Monitor's remains, and realizing what she has done makes Layla hysterical with grief, which is quickly addressed when the Monitor's pre-recorded message starts playing to explain that he had prepared for Layla's inevitable murder on him by making his remaining energies be released when his body died, and so power the towers on Earth 1 and Earth 2 to save them from the antimatter waves to a netherverse created from the Monitor's energies. Those are the good news, while the bad news are that the netherverse is slowly merging Earth 1 and Earth 2 together, which can on the long run make them destroy each other. The recording ends with the Monitor forgiving Layla for having killed him, after which Alexander Jr., now aged up to an adult, joins her and Pariah to explain that the Monitor has left him with the instructions on what to do next. Also, Alexander says that the Monitor had discovered that Alexander's rapid aging was caused because he is composed of both positive and negative matter. Before going to address the survivors of Earth 1 and Earth 2, Alexander, Layla and Pariah launched the Monitor's remains to the cosmos as a funeral rite, which the shadowy figure with Psycho Pirate sees to curse the Monitor before dismissing this small victory, as the Flash then suddenly appears into the void they are in to join Red Tornado as a prisoner and as Psycho Pirate's next torture victim. In the next scene, we are shown how Earth 1 and Earth 2 are going through that Doctor Who episode where it was 5:02 PM on April 22nd, 2011 all the time.
Well, what happened?
Nothing happened, and then it kept happening. Or, if you'd prefer, everything happened at once and it won't ever stop. Time is dying. It's going to be 5:02 in the afternoon for all eternity. A needle stuck on a record.
A record? Good Lord, man, have you never heard of downloads?
Said Winston Churchill.
But since this is set in 1986 and that episode has not come out yet, we instead have Alexander, Pariah and Layla as Harbinger invite all those heroes and villains to the Monitor's satellite to explain it to them on their terms. Telling them that the Monitor is dead silences some opposing, and Alexander telling them of how there is an intelligent enemy out there who sent the antimatter waves, gains them support from authorities like the Phantom Stranger and Swamp Thing. Ultimately, this ends up like a sales pitch, where Alexander tells them to go see how chaotic their world is now, and then come back when they have changed their minds. This chaos includes the Silver Lining, where all the other planets in the 2 universes have also been stored into the Netherverse, but coexisting with each other is naturally causing obvious pandemonium. People from past, present and future are coexisting. The Green Lantern Corps are done the same thing that happened to the Guardians. Lois Lane, while reporting about all this, is rescued from a saber-toothed predator by the Earth 2 Superman, while Earth 1 Superman catches up. An elderly couple with a dead child sees their grown-up daughter alive. And looking at this image, I'm pretty sure everyone here now knows that Batman is Bruce Wayne. Also, while taking down some rampaging dinosaurs, Psycho Pirate's spell on Killer Frost wears off and she is no longer romantically infatuated with Firestorm. Then the shadowy antagonist sends a hacked out Red Tornado to cause a massive storm that, long story short, ends up making the heroes join forces together and unanimously choose to do as Alexander, Pariah and Harbinger want them to. Also, Wildcat was the only shown casualty in losing the use of his legs while saving a child from falling. Later, some of the heroes are called back to the Monitor's satellite to be sent to save one of the remaining 3 Earths that is going to be hit with the antimatter wave next and make their unseen enemy become even more powerful, because he is already that powerful that he can remotely attack the satellite and at the Flash's urging to show himself to be revealed as another and now remaining Monitor.
Flash, you are a fool to think you can bait me. I am not motivated by mere emotion. I have been busy elsewhere, but if you truly wish to see me, I see no reason I should deny you that privilege.
Oh my god.
Greetings, Flash. I hope the anticipation has been worth it. Call me the Monitor, and very soon I shall be the ruler of all who live.
But to make the separation easier, I'm just going to refer to this thing as the Anti-Monitor, as which he is referred to later anyway. Anyway, the antimatter wave is now reaching Earth X as Uncle Sam and the Freedom Fighters' problem, which the Anti-Monitor decides to make even bigger by now, making Psycho Pirate use his emotional manipulation powers to influence people on those Earths. Meanwhile, the Monitor's satellite is falling apart with Pariah fading away, meaning that the rescuing of those next worlds from the antimatter wave is going to be harder, with Alexander trying to replicate what the Monitor did. But Harbinger, feeling guilty for having murdered the Monitor, stops Alexander from sacrificing himself similarly, and instead sends the heroes on board the satellite to Earth's X, Earth 4, and Earth S, while also doing a thing right before the satellite blows up. Before we get back to that, Wildcat, whose legs were broken, is looked after by his goddaughter Yolanda, while the Brainiac drone from part 1 finally finds Lex Luthor and beams him up onto his skull ship. Okay, and now back to explaining what is happening on those 3 Earths. The Anti-Monitor has made Psycho Pirate emotionally manipulate the native heroes and civilians to both run at the antimatter wave and blame the heroes who were transported onto them of making the antimatter wave be there in the first place, while Harbinger is shown like a constellation on the sky. Without making this too long to elaborate, think of this scene like a loading sequence with Harbinger being the one loading her essence to do what the Monitor did. It takes time, and during that time, the heroes not affected by Psycho Pirate's influence need to hold the line in keeping the infected heroes, like the Freedom Fighters, the Charlton characters, and the Shazam family from fighting them, while stopping the civilians from walking to their doom. Ultimately, the 3 Earths are rescued into the Netherverse with Earth 1 and Earth 2, at the cost of Harbinger's powers in reducing her into just being Layla from now on. And with the Netherverse now being inhabited by 5 Earths, which are all still trying to merge with each other. So Layla and Alexander now need to pick up who they can from the survivors they have saved and move on with their plans to save the 5 Earths before they destroy each other. On Earth 2, villains fleeing from the Justice Society disappear from the heroes pursuing them, and Yolanda, looking after the resting dead, promises to her godfather to honor his legacy as the new Wildcat.
Here, put on the cap. Oh my god, it smells worse than the soup.
Come on.
How did it?
It's one size fits all, apparently. That is so cool.
Around this time, Pariah appears to Layla and Alexander, who promise to him the peace he longs for after they have done what they need to do next. Meanwhile, more villains disappear in front of the heroes about to catch them, which is leading up to something later with Brainiac. Layla then appears to tell heroes like Shazam that Psycho Pirate manipulated his emotions to control them, while also with Alexander and Pariah collecting 1 hero per Earth to bring Lady Quark, both Earth 1 and Earth 2 Superman, Uncle Sam, Shazam, and Blue Beetle to listen to Pariah's origin story, and the prequel to Pariah's origin story. TLDR on both. Billions of years ago, an Oan named Krona sent a probe back in time to see how the existence was created. He ended up getting a glimpse of the hand doing it, and even that was apparently too much because witnessing the setup for the Big Bang then caused another Big Bang, that made the existence to coexist with both positive and negative forms. Or in other words, in the normal matter universe and in the antimatter universe. Krona was sentenced and exiled to a later DC vs Marvel crossover, and the Oans formed into the Guardians of the Universe in first trying to create the Manhunters, and then the Green Lantern Corps when the Manhunters glitched out. Fast forward some Green Lantern lore I'm going to skip over because the animated movie is probably going to do that too. Both the Monitor and the Anti-Monitor rose to have a long-distance slapping contest like siblings whose mother is not there to look after them, and eventually they grew tired and fell asleep. And that was the prequel to Pariah's origin story. Moving on to which, 9 billion years later. On Pariah's Earth, he used to be a respectable scientist in a futuristic-looking world until he somehow managed to discover that the multiverse is a thing and decided to ignore the legend out of Krona's actions, just enough to try doing the exact same thing but in a different way. See, because the antimatter universe was a thing at this point, Pariah created an antimatter chamber with the beliefs that he could observe the origin of all existence. But as we know, niin vituiksihan se kaikki tietenkin meni. Just entering the damn thing caused the antimatter to leak into the positive matter universe, and so Pariah ended up not only destroying his own universe, but also awakening the Anti-Monitor by extending the antimatter universe to fill the void left by his world. The Anti-Monitor grew hungry from having fed on Pariah's world, and the Monitor who had awoken grew weaker, as more and more worlds ended up getting devoured by the antimatter wave, just managing to rescue Pariah and those 5 Earths so far before he ended up dying at the hands of Layla, whom he had rescued in the middle of all this. That is how we have ended up here, and with this knowledge, the hero roster is extended to include a larger number to assault the Anti-Monitor on his home turf, with Alexander using both his positive and negative matter powers to open a way for the 2 Supermen, Shazam, Supergirl, Wonder Woman, Firestorm, Light Ray, the new Dr. Light, Lady Quark, Captain Atom, Jade, Alan Scott's Green Lantern, Martian Manhunter, Mon-El, and Wildfire to the Anti-Matter universe, where the Pariah leads them in seeing this as his atonement. In the Anti-Matter universe, they find the Anti-Monitor's Great Stone Fortress, where the Anti-Monitor's planned countermeasure against them doesn't work because
They come in their vain attempt to save their universes. Their only reward shall be death. No, perhaps not. Come to me, Psycho Pirate. Use your emotion-controlling powers and make those warriors my slaves.
Monitor, you used me to control all those worlds. It'll take time to recharge. I cannot do anything now.
What? Why do you think I kept you alive? Your need to control those 3 worlds was not anticipated when the Monitor interfered with my plans. I merely used your powers to facilitate them, but I needed you here, now, and you failed me. Very well, I must take matters into my own hands.
So instead, the Anti-Monitor makes his fortress come alive to attack them, and as there is no yellow sunlight, their attacks are strong enough to make the Earth's 2 Supermen bleed.
Tell me, do you bleed?
While fighting / dodging / surviving the rock formations attacking them, Pariah and Dr. Light manage to reach towards the inner sanctum until Pariah gets and Dr. Light, not having been there to hear his origin story, charges to avenge his death with Earth 1 Superman in her tail. She is still smart enough to wait for him when reaching what Dr. Kimio Hoshi recognized and describes as a solar collector that converts starlight into energy and reduces the vibrational differences between the 5 survived Earths. So of course Superman recognizes that this machine needs to be destroyed, and in approaching it, the Anti-Monitor attacks Superman from behind so hard that it causes Superman to scream in pain so hard that Supergirl hears him and flies past everyone else surviving the attacking rock fortress to join the fight and This is such an amazing showcasing of Supergirl's heroic drive to protect Superman that Dr. Light is humbled to realize that she needs to get some character growth from how she was introduced, as Supergirl has managed to both destroy the Solar Collector while beating the Anti-Manager up into such a bad shape that he is ready to take them all out by using the self-destruct move. And Supergirl keeps up her heroic drive by telling Dr. Light to take Superman away to recover, while she charges at the Anti-Monitor to start beating him up even more. But then Dr. Light calls out to Supergirl and unintentionally distracts her from the Anti-Monitor getting a shot at her.
You turn in, Battle-Girl. Fatal mistake.
And escape deeper into the Antimatter universe to lick his wounds.
My body is destroyed. I cannot remain here. I need time to heal. This is not over. I shall stand triumphant at the dawn of time!
In the Anti-Monitor's absence, his fortress crumbles, and the heroes who were held back by it are called together around the destroyed Solar Collector, where Superman holding Supergirl in his arms is made the last survivor of Krypton, as she dies telling him not to cry. With Earth 2 Superman helping him calm down, Superman is reminded that they have succeeded in stopping the 5 Earths from merging to destroy each other, and depart from the Antimatter universe as the Rock Fortress falls apart after them. In the new normal, where the 5 Earths are coexisting in the Netherverse in a relevant harmony, Supergirl is given a memorial service reported by Lois Lane for the Daily Planet and Lana Lang for WGBS. While Batgirl is one of those who have an eulogy to speak for her, and later Superman gives her last rites in private before flying her remains to space. Elsewhere in the cosmic existence, Darkseid acknowledges what is happening outside of the fourth world, while the Guardians and their Green Lantern Corps are finally picking themselves up from their absence from the story so far. In the 31st century, the Legion of Superheroes observe how the 5 Earths are coexisting now that they have mourned Supergirl's death. And in the present day, Green Lantern John Stewart returns to Earth 1. Red Tornado blows up just so that superhero Firehawk could get a new costume, and other shenanigans happens that leads into tie-in issues. With that out of the way, remember how the Flash is still held captive by the Anti-Monitor, who has rebuilt himself into a new form by now, and Psycho Pirate in the Antimatter universe. Well, around this time they have moved to Quard to have the Thunderers build an antimatter cannon to snipe out the 5 remaining Earths from a distance. And when Psycho Pirate approaches the imprisoned Flash to try to recharge his powers, it is the Flash whose powers have been restored after holding himself passively down up to now. And he is too angry at himself to let Psycho Pirate to emotionally manipulate him again. So instead the Flash uses the Psycho Pirate against the Anti-Monitor.
I sense a disturbance.
By turning the Thunderers against him one by one, to make sure no one will be protecting the Antimatter cannon and its construction. With the Thunderers busy keeping the Anti-Monitor's attention elsewhere, the Flash leaves the Psycho Pirate to lean on his own luck as he deserves, and then charges at the cannon to try to disassemble it. But there Barry realizes that the cannon is powered by concentrated antimatter that will be released once the canon is taken apart. And it is already draining life from the Flash when contained, so...
You fools! Do you not feel the disturbance? The antimatter cannon has been tampered with. It is the Flash. He has destroyed the outer casing. Energy is escaping. All the power gone. He will die for this!
The more the Flash keeps tearing the canon apart, the more he keeps getting exposed to the antimatter. And as explained with a context that won't be created until a decade later, his running opens the Speed Force to let Barry see further in time to the future, as well as backwards in time to the past, when Batman and the Joker saw him. He runs while getting weaker until the cannon's power source is unleashed to let Barry out of his misery. The Anti-Monitor swears to consume the remaining 5 Earths with newer alternative means, while the aftermath of the Flash's heroic sacrifice is echoed to Earth 1 for the challengers of the unknown to detect, and the Spectre senses what the Anti-Monitor will be doing next.
It's the end of the show. Hear them, they're calling your name. 'Cause in the end, it's you and your friends. You'll find your...
And scene. Thanks, Pika.
And thank you, Heat, for doing those line reads for Anti-Monitor and Psycho-Pirate in the story commentary. George Perez's art is still good enough that you can hear some of the panels talking to you, but that doesn't make your contributions any lesser. Okay, and now let's talk about how issues 5, 6, 7 and 8 moved the story forward. It was a rather intriguing plot twist that the Monitor was always going to die as the story was moving forward, and the fact that he was doing everything he could with the time he had to save as many Earths as he could. That was a surprising way of subverting expectations following a cliffhanger, where it looked like all was lost, but rather, everyone had been bought more time, which they had to use to fight not only for their survival, but also save the other remaining survivors while the main bad guy made his presence known. And then there were also some moments that either carried over from or to the ongoing comics at the time, like where Brainiac picked up Lex Luthor from, Yolanda Montes becoming the next Wildcat following what happened to Teddy Grant, and that thing with Firehawk and Blue Devil. Then there was Pariah's origin story and its prequel with Krona creating the multiverse with the Antimatter universe, which expanded the opening narration from issue 1 as what happened behind the scenes. That then leads to the 2 deaths that the Crisis on Infinite Earths is also infamous for. Supergirl, as I previously brought up in my Superman Batman Supergirl Apocalypse video 2 years ago, fell victim to the newly demanded status quo DC wanted for Superman as the only remaining Kryptonian survivor, without realizing that the last son of Krypton can also mean that Superman was the last one born on the planet before it blew up. However, at the very least, Supergirl was given a strong last stand to give her a strong exit and have her die while committing a heroic act. Similar to how Jason Todd's Robin would also be killed off while trying to save his mother by a writer who didn't like him. Although I don't think that Marv Wolfman had any similar dislike towards Supergirl as Jim Starlin did towards Jason Todd's Robin. Still, the Kara Zor-El version of Supergirl was dead for about 18 years until Jeff Lowe brought her back, as I presented in that video I made 2 years ago. Barry Allen's Flash took even longer, with 23 years to come back after that heroic sacrifice he pulled off without anyone being there to witness it, although they do learn about it in later issues. Heroes. Either way, the story of Crisis on Infinite Earths is now past the halfway point, where the main bad guy has been defeated once, and his strike back has been delayed to make the next attempt at round 2 happen in part 3. Now, at the time of the writing, Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 2 movie has not come out yet, so before I start to talking about that, I might as well acknowledge what I skipped over from talking about at the end of my last video on it. Like how the Flash's death got switched in the place of the Monitor's death, so that the towers built on the 5 Earths at the 11th hour could be powered as tuning forks, and make the Earths vibrate through the antimatter wave as it went past them. While that survival was somewhat celebrated, it ended quickly when the future with the Legion of Superheroes ended up getting erased, which now makes me wonder how they still existed in the comic at this point, with Dawnstar and Brainiac 5 getting retconned. Okay, and now I'll wait for the animated movie to come out, and for that transitioning on that wait, here's Ahti and the Janitors with Yötön Yö. Two things before I really dive into this. Our friend Robert got to meet Josie Campbell, one of the people working on the Tomorrowverse movies, while we were waiting for the movie to come out. And he forwarded back to me that the whole thing with Supergirl being Harbinger was a passive idea on the background of the Legion of the Superheroes movie, which I should probably watch before part 3 comes out. And another thing that Josie told Robert was that Crisis on Infinite Earths was a passion project that Jim Krieg apparently has had for some time. And it was then turned into a farewell project after David Zaslav took over leading Warner Bros. Discovery as it exists right now. Number 2. While I reached the 23rd of April when this movie came out, in a rush to get back to working on this video, I ended up looking up a bootlegged version of it with messed up colors, which then led me to push myself into learning how DaVinci Resolve's color changing mechanic works. Look, this is the movie I ended up watching, and this is the movie I managed to fix up later. What's Robin here? I go to Koi Boost and I turn it up to 100. Then I go to shading. I also turn that to 100. Then highlight. I turn that to -10. So far, nothing wrong, but it looks brighter and colors are whatever they are. Now, next up we have saturization. Saturization goes 20 down to 3940, it should be 3940. Then there's hue, which goes to 2280. So, and now look, Robin starts to look normal-ish. I'm starting to look kind of sick and green, but that's the price we pay for the quality here. Okay, and now let's talk about this part 2 adaptation of Crisis on Infinite Earths. So it turns out that the version of Psycho Pirate we have in this movie is the Charles Halstead version, instead of the Roger Hayden version who we have in the comic. The Halstead version gets his backstory tied into the previous movies like Justice Society World War II, alongside how Supergirl's backstory is explained on why she is in Lila's place as the Harbinger. Just like how the Monitor rescued Lila from the shipwreck at the sea in the comic, the animated movie's version saved Kara from when Krypton blew up, and by the end of the movie, we have Psycho Pirate use that to emotionally manipulate her into killing the Monitor, for having just watched it happen without trying to prevent or save more Kryptonians than just her. The whole argument has too many holes to list out, that you would actually need to be emotionally compromised to fall for it. Regardless, the backstories for those two take up most of the runtime in the first 30 minutes of the movie, while the remaining hour is spent with the remaining Earths pretty much going through what was happening in issues 3 and 4. Meaning that this movie ends exactly like how part 1 should have ended. I'm starting to fear that there might end up being a part 4 movie, so that the remaining issues 9 through 12 can also be adapted. Either that, or it will end where the issue 10 does. Prove me wrong, Jim Krieg. So, as a middle ground for what is happening in issues 1 through 4 and in the issues 5 through 8, the one antimatter wave from the comic is escalated into being multiple waves coming for the multiple surviving Earths. The towers built on them in part 1 are turned on when they come and then off when they pass, which so has the group of geniuses trying to work on a more permanent solution, aka the Netherverse.
And there's nowhere to go.
You might just have something there. Escape to nowhere. There's a theoretical dimension called Netherspace.
Okay, now we get it.
What if we use the towers to broadcast your transmatter beam to move all the Earths there?
But since this movie wants to end with the Monitor dying, that comes across more as a Chekhov's gun on how part 3 probably opens. As for what is from issues 5 through 8, the Psycho Pirate is initially used for emotional crowd control to keep the bystanders from panicking, before he is then swiped out into the Anti-Monitor's Black Void, where the Anti-Monitor is presented and portrayed more childlike than how the comic and Jay Heath portrayed him.
What is a name?
It's just a word that means you, like Charles, or the Monitor.
Not like Monitor. Nothing like him. He opposes me.
Obviously, you're nothing like him. You're the opposite of him. You're the anti-Monitor.
Okay, there it comes.
Anti-Monitor. Yes. But why do you help him?
That then leads to Psycho Pirate switching sides and deciding to do to the surviving Earths what the other Psycho Pirate did to Earth 4, Earth S, and Earth X. Among the infected by his emotional manipulation are Jon Stewart's Green Lantern versus Dr. Light, Wonder Woman versus a deep and misandrist version of Hippolyta, and a mixed version of the Bat family with the Tomorrowverse Batman who never had a Robin, the Earth 2 Robin and Huntress, a probably local to that Earth Batgirl and Damian Wayne Robin, and Will Friedle back voicing Batman Beyond.
That Batman is a fool.
I'll tell you what he wasn't. Alone. You don't know what it's like here. I'm alone. The last boy on Earth, the last human.
And he also voiced Kamandi in an extension of that scene from issues 2 and 3 in showing how Solovar ended up getting wounded. But otherwise, those Bat family members are just there, and whatever first impressions they had in Batman meeting a version of his successor or his flesh and blood son happened between movies off screen. Oh, and the shadow creatures are now included in this movie, but they are treated more like taken from Alan Wake in being easily defeated with a strong light source. And this time, Matt Ryan was brought to voice John Constantine turned Pariah, who is turned back into John Constantine while arguing with Green Lantern until they share a Martha moment.
Show me what you got, Green Lantern.
I told you. Green Lantern isn't my name. It's my job. My name is John!
That's it. That's my name. I've been trying to think of it for 100 years, 1,000 years. No one has called me that in a long, long time. It's all coming back. Ta-da!
And again, that is pretty much it. Long story short, this part 2 movie is more of a part 1.5 movie. So, J Heat, do you have anything to add to that?
Santa Maria! Oh, God. Okay, I'm not gonna be a purist about it. I'm trying really hard not to be a purist about comic book purist about this, but this was just bad. I'm just like, I get it. This is supposed to be. I'll probably go into more detail later on, but here's what I'll say for this section. I get you're trying to wrap everything up with the Tomorrowverse and create a clean slate for James Gunn's DCU, if it even gets off the ground. But the budget can't support the gravitas of this kind of story. All the more reason a Crisis adaptation should have been a standalone adaptation. Should have been a standalone two-parter. Even though Part 2 is not a good movie on its own, it does do the bare minimum and act as an interlude or a transition between 1 and 3. All the more reason you trim down the fat, because all you really need is like Barry's in part 1, Barry's life flashing before his eyes as he makes the big sacrifice play to give everyone a fighting chance against the antimatter wave. That's really all you needed, even with the Tomorrowverse hiccups of how this universe is imploding because corporate ended up in a different direction. And I'll probably do a separate video on Tomorrowverse, the transition era of DC animated movies. And I'm just like, it did what it was supposed to do. It was job security, but this was dead in the water, from the cheap budget to the relative writing quality. But again, topic for a different stream. I will say this though, this was a monotony of stupid decisions. The Martha comparison, I'll admit I got a chuckle out of that. I will be the first to admit that. I did get a chuckle out of that. But bloody hell. It's Constantine. He returns to sane. In Pariah, he's sane the entire time. It's only until Dark Crisis he loses his goddamn mind. But Pariah in Crisis is just self-loathing for what he's done and what he's unleashed on the multiverse. Pariah's just self-loathing the entire time, up until like the very end. But I digress. Comparisons aside, Matt Ryan does come back to actually voice Constantine, even though it's only a couple of lines. So that was entertaining. And it does serve well what it was supposed to do. You know, don't really have Harbinger, have Supergirl be a stand-in, tie into how she was in an ageless, non-linear flow of time while Clark was being raised on Earth. It does all the beats, even including Psycho Pirate and using Supergirl's angst to compel her and her emotions to ultimately killing Monitor. The only biggest gripe I could possibly have outside of budgeting or animation concerns is a combination of the fan service, because despite this being advertised with Terry McGinnis as actor from the DCAU and Batman Beyond, he only got a few lines, like 2 or 3. He might have a little bit more part 3, but other than that, it's the Psycho Pirate stuff. Because in the original comics, Psycho Pirate was kind of this screeching and yes, Crisis was the culmination, the climax of the Silver Age, I know that, mind you, where he was kind of a cowardly wretch. He knew how to manipulate people's emotions, pull capers, and get out of dodge, but ultimately in a direct confrontation or when his gimmick wasn't in play, he would buckle relatively quickly. Whereas in Crisis, he was kind of manipulated. You could argue he had a pseudo-god complex, or at least a strong desire that the Anti-Monitor can manipulate, but you don't really need Psycho Pirate, at least in that context. Psycho Pirate is just there to deter any resistance that the Monitor had from recruiting the heroes. And Anti-Monitor kind of feels just like amalgamation of what's going on rather than his own entity. Maybe part 3 will change that. And yes, the Shadow Demons are kind of like the henchmen of the storyline and the huge budgeting and animation constraints. Almost as if this should have been a standalone rather than a Tomorrowverse wrap-up adjacent to what Flashpoint and Apocalypse War were. But nitpicks aside, I don't want to take too much screen time from you, Pika. Let's go on with the show.
That's okay, J-Heat. This video is close to the end by now anyway, so thank you for also stretching it longer in a non-pretentious way. Again, we don't have a release date for when part 3 comes out, so I'll try to find some more lines for you to voice when I get into writing the story commentary for the remaining 4 issues. Until that happens, remember to like this video, comment what you have to say about the comic and the movie, share this video for more people to see, and subscribe to the channel for the next videos I will be working on before part 3 comes out. Go check out J-Heat's channel too, while also dinging the bell for when I will be doing gameplay streams for a chance to chat with me, and may your heart be your guiding key.